country of Puerto Rico. So all of the telephone calls that were made between Puerto Rico and the United States, we billed for that. And so that was a program that I worked on initially.
So in a sense, you designed. You said coding.
Right.
So when you said you billed for the Puerto Rico.
Yes, all the telephone calls that were made in Puerto Rico. See, AT&T, which was the American telephone company, did business with the Puerto Rican telephone company, and there was one big bill. Like your mom gets a bill, but company to company there were bills, and so I worked on. All the bills came in from all of what we call the non-contiguous states of the United States.
Right, okay.
You know what non-contiguous means?
Not exactly.
Okay, non-contiguous means that it's not a part of the main. It's like a subpart. So, you know, we have 50 states, right? But part of those 50 states is Hawaii and Alaska. And see, Hawaii and Alaska are not attached to the United States, right? So they're considered non-contiguous.
Okay.
Like all the other states are contiguous, but they would be called non-contiguous. So all the bills from all of the non-contiguous states came into one big batch, like a big cup.
Mm-hmm.
All the bills came in there. And what we had to do was separate out all the calls from each of the different countries so that we could bill them specifically, because believe it or not, each one of them had their own different rates.
Wow.
So like if you were like from Alaska, we may charge you 5 cents a call, but you're from Puerto Rico, we may charge you 10 cents a call. And if you're from the Caribbean, we may charge you 25 cents per call. So all of them were calls, but each of them had a different rate. We charged them differently, and so that's how, and that's what the program that I created did. It brought all the data comes in, because that's what a computer does. It takes all the data in one big cup, and then it separates it out into smaller cups, and then you kind of work with those smaller cups, because just like each one of us are different, that's sort of like the way that a computer does. It knows everything that Aaliyah likes, and it knows everything that Leo likes, and it knows everything Mikael likes. But all those likes are in one little cup. And then when they see red, because Aaliyah's favorite color is red, it'll send that red to Aaliyah. But Leo won't even see it, because he doesn't like red. So basically that's how the computer works. You know, data comes in, you massage it, and then it goes out a different way than when it came in.
Right.
Because you're trying to solve a problem. Basically, that's what computers do. They solve problems.
Right.
So that's what I started out doing, and then it just progressed from one thing to another. So that was just one little program that I worked on, and then that little program went into a whole system that did nothing but billing.
Okay.
But then there were other systems that did claims. There were other systems that did other things to that same data.
Okay.
Okay? So that particular system was a part of a huge data center. So you could like all of these, all the different drawings that Dr. Lawrence has on the wall, all of them could be considered a program.
Okay.
But all of them were in what we call the data center, because it was all data. And so then I worked in what they call the data center. So I didn't just work with a little program that dealt with just billing.
Right.
I dealt with data from different companies, different types of programs. So it's like the big data center. We had all these different systems that did all different things. But then there was maintenance on the whole data center. It's like, she has all of this here, but sometimes each one of them has to be cleaned. And so that's a whole nother side of programming. So I worked in that for a while, and then, so these are years mounting up. So I was with AT&T for 20 years.
Wow, that's good. Okay.
And like I say, at first I started programming, then I started designing programs, because someone has to decide, you got all this data here, now what do we want to do with that data? And so I started designing some of the things that were happening. Then I moved on to the data center, where I wasn't concerned about what the data was. It was just the fact that it was data, and data had to be moved. Data had to be backed up. So just in case, something spilled or something got burned up or chewed up, we'd have a way of recreating it.
Okay.
So I moved on to, and so then after 20 years, IBM decided that they wanted to hire AT&T to do all of their networking. So I was involved in an acquisition. You know what an acquisition is? An acquisition is a purchase. Like you go to the store and you buy something, you kind of acquire it, but in a different sense. But basically, my department was sold from AT&T over to IBM. So I started being an IBM employee. And AT&T has always been in the telegraph business. IBM had always been in the machine business, like cash registers and typewriters and stuff. So they had a very, what can I say? They had a very
Complementary?
complementary relationship, because AT&T, they dealt with the telephones and AT&T dealt with the transmission of data,
Right.
the telephone or whatever, the listening to it. But they needed equipment, so IBM provided the equipment to AT&T so that they could do their business. And along the lines, it got to be where IBM got out of the equipment business and they got into service. And service is like what I can do for you. So I ended up being a project manager. And what a project manager does is someone else comes up with something that they want to do. Let's say you want to teach soccer. So we've come up with what are all the different things that need to be done. If you want to teach soccer, what's the first thing you're going to have? What would you need to do?
Your supplies.
You got to have your supplies.
Find a place to play.
Find a place to play it.
Find players to play with.
Some people to play with it. You got to have the instructions. You got to have the instructor. So what a project manager, and you want to do this, and what the project manager does is it's all about doing whatever you want to do within the money that you have. You have to have within your budget, and it has to be time bound. So, and that's how you get graded or you get paid, is that if your project comes in under budget, on time, and it does what it set out to do. So let's just take we're going to take the project of teaching children how to play soccer, right? So, Mr. Brown, Coach Brown, he had to come up with the equipment, the know-how, everything. He had to have the children. And then he had a time. So like, you all couldn't stay out there all day. And then he had an objective. Did he teach you all the skills of soccer? And what would happen is you would put down all the steps that we need to do, and then you would evaluate it to see if, number one, he did it on time. Did he do it within his budget? And was he successful in teaching you what to do? And so that's a project. But what I was doing, going back to my computers and the data centers, one of my most famous projects that I did was what we call disaster recovery.
Okay.
So what in disaster recovery, we say on July the 4th, we're going to blow up this building that keeps all of this data. It keeps data for an insurance company. And when we blow it up, we need for you to recreate all this data in 3 days. Yes. And actually, and we were able to do that. But it took us about 18 months to get everything in place in order to do that. But that's what IBM sold. They sold that service that I will handle your data so that if anything happens to your data, if y'all remember Katrina, the Hurricane Katrina, where everything was destroyed.
Right.
Well, a lot of businesses down there had disaster recovery plans, and the ones that paid for it were able to get their data recreated in a short amount of time.
Right.
This is what IBM sells that service of, if anything happens to your data, I can replace it for you in X amount of time. And if you want it recreated in 1 day, you pay millions and millions of dollars for that. If you want it done in 5 days, maybe $500,000. But if you can wait 30 days, then it's a lot cheaper. But it depends on the type of business that you have. And in the insurance business, they wanted 3 days. In 3 days, they wanted for you to be able to recreate all of their data. So that's what I've been doing for the last 30 years.
Now, this data recovery, back in the day with the sort of punch cards,
Right.
that would have been much more difficult.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it has changed a lot even now, because what had to happen was at a data center, so like what they would do, like I tell you, all the images on the walls, that would be your data. And we made a copy of it. And they put it on these tapes, sort of like those CD tapes that Mr. Wilson has there. And every night, they would back it up.
Right.
So there was a warehouse that had nothing but tapes. And, this side would have tapes from today, this one from yesterday, from 2 days ago, from 10 weeks ago, or whatever. So that, and you had to say, okay, if I have a disaster, I can get back everything from yesterday, or you're gonna lose some data, not unless you do have the real time.
Right.
Every time you do something, it's recorded.
Right.
And some people do have that service.
Which, just interrupting you, which is what happened to you yesterday, Leo. We didn't back up your drawing, that's why you lost it. Remember on face, when you were making the face? You overwrote your picture Okay, so that's what we're talking about. If you back it up, then you'd be able to get it back.
Yeah.
Okay, very interesting.
And
yeah.
so IBM, and that's a service that and so that's why they have gotten away from the computer, the actual hardware and the software. It's all about being able to recreate your data if you need it. You know, now, and so going back to that, when I was doing this, you had there's a vault. There's a company that does nothing but keep your data.
Oh, on the magnetic tapes or on, what do they store it on? On hard drives or on magnetic tapes or whatever?
Yeah, on magnetic tape.
Right.
Used to. Now everything is in the cloud, so even though the cloud is up there, that cloud is being backed up on some computers.
Right, okay.
So that they can find the data. The interesting part, and we used to lose a lot of data, but now they don't lose data. So anything that you put out on Facebook and YouTube,
Right.
Twitter,
Yeah.
and Snapchat, and all these different services, that data is there. And and they can go back from the beginning that you started doing data. So that's why, I don't know if you all have heard about, I don't know if you keep up with basketball, you know, maybe a little too young, but you keep up basketball. Okay, so the Lakers, their first round draft choice this
Right,
time.
yeah. Oh, right. He said something
He made
about
a derogatory
Yes.
comment about
Kobe
Bryant
Bryant.
4 years ago. This was back when he was still in high school.
Right.
But that comment has come back, and now he has to deal with that because now he and Kobe are going to be teammates.
Right.
So you have to be careful about what you say because it will come back on you. And not only that, for you all, everything that you do now is being recorded.
Hello.
Just about anywhere and everywhere. Look, right? Even right. And start looking at this, especially when you get to a red light. Start looking up, and you will be amazed at how many cameras you see. Especially on the interstate, right here on Panola Road, there are 4 cameras. Right there at Publix, there's cameras. Almost every bank, almost every store has surveillance cameras. So you want to start to kind of being aware of that, just so that you kind of don't fall into a trap of, I can do something and nobody sees me. Because everything that you do is being recorded.
All right, thank you.